details the highly questionable methods that were used by the FBI and the Department of Justice to surveil an American citizen on the Trump campaign is now out. Democrats and the FBI fought as hard as they could to keep this thing under wraps. The House Intel Committee says that the memo proves that these same people worked as hard as they could to get the dossier out into the public. That is just one of the many questions in all of this tonight. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is The Story. The president summed it up like this.
What do you think of it? Make your way out.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that. So I sent it over to Congress. They will do what they're going to do. Whatever they do is fine.
Are you not concerned that the FBI doesn't want the memo out?
Thank you very much.
Is it making you more likely to fire Rosenstein? Do you still have confidence in him after reading the memo?
You figure that one out.
You figured that one out, says the president of the United States. Now, according to the memo, FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who stepped down from his post after his boss would have seen this memo, said without that dossier written by ex-spy Christopher Steele, there would be no warrant, despite questions about the dossier's accuracy, a prediction made months ago by the target of that FISA warrant. Here's Carter Page back then.
When the truth comes out, when Speaker Paul Ryan says the FISA warrant or the details about the dodgy dossier and what happened and all those documents around that is going to be released, that's what I'm really excited about. And I think that the truth will set a lot of people free.
Interesting, right? Ed Henry here with the details tonight, the key players, and how all of this played out.
Well, Martha, good to see you. And breaking tonight, Democrats renewing their calls for Congressman Devin Nunes to be removed, which is leading top Republicans to say this shows the House Intel chairman actually succeeded in delivering explosive information, despite those reports last night suggesting it'd be a dud. The memo released by Nunes suggests top officials at the Obama-led Justice Department and FBI used unverified information from that dossier to get a FISA warrant to surveil former Trump advisor Carter Page and essentially spy on the Trump camp. This zeroes in on former British spy Christopher Steele and how he was, in his own words, desperate to prevent Donald Trump from being elected. The memo says, quote, after Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within FBI assessed Steele's reporting as only minimally corroborated. Yet in early January 2017, Director James Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified. The memo adds in September 2016, Steele told Obama Justice Department official Bruce Orr his goal was to block Trump's election, and the memo alleges, quote, during the same period, Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of Oppo research on Trump. Orr later provided the FBI with all of his wife's Oppo research, paid for by the DNC in the Clinton campaign via Fusion. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion was inexplicably concealed from the FISA court. Now, Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, who was just ousted, you noted, is one of the officials who went to the FISA court to get the surveillance. The memo says that McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017. No surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. Listen.
It answers the question about did the FBI use this Democrat Party-funded dossier to obtain surveillance? And the answer to that question is yes.
It's referencing the campaign of Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic National Committee funded the dossier. The current DNC chair, Tom Perez, fired back, calling it a sham memo that's out to discredit special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Perez saying, quote, we can't let them undermine our justice system to serve their partisan political interest. No one is above the law. But on the question of law, there's a lot more information we have to get on why a Trump appointee like Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein helped renew the FISA warrants after the new president took office. Allies of James Comey and other officials named in the memo note the dossier may have only been a small percentage of the info submitted to the judge to get the warrants. Comey tweeting today, that's it? Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust within the Intel community, damaged relationship with the FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified info in the investigation of an American citizen. For what? DOJ and FBI must keep doing their jobs. But remember that bit you played there at the top, the president saying, what do you think? When asked about Rosenstein, it suggests there could be some more house cleaning here, Martha.
Thanks. Ed's going to stick around as we continue to go through this breaking news tonight. Here with more, Congressman Pete King, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee. We've spoken with him throughout this process, but now Congressman King, the memo is out. We have all read it. Ed has just detailed some of the strongest points that it makes. What do you make of what the former FBI Director James Comey says about how this memo and the release of it has wrecked so many of the individuals who were involved with it and the agencies?
I was one of those people who over the years supported James Comey. I am really disappointed. That was just a political response. He does not dispute one fact in this 4-page report. And this is a devastating indictment of his tenure at the FBI. I would have thought he would have pointed to at least one fact that he disagreed with, or one thing that was wrong. Instead, he just come out with something that sounds like a talking point for the Democratic National Committee. So that, to me, shows that he's concerned about something. That was a very, very not just disingenuous, really a disappointing response from the former director of the FBI. If that's the best he can do, that shows something's bothering him.
Well, the underlying sort of overall thrust of this is that several individuals, including James Comey and Andrew McCabe and Sally Yates and others, all signed off on the application for these FISA warrants. Every 90 days it has to be renewed. And as I understand it through the read of this, every 90 days you have to have a very specific reason to renew it. And what they used, according to this, what we have here so far, according to this, what they used was the findings of Christopher Steele. And yet they never mentioned to the FISA court, even though they knew, according to this document, if it's accurate, that Steele was funded by the Clinton campaign. They never mentioned that to the FISA judges?
Yeah, that is shameful. The American public should realize this isn't like giving somebody a traffic ticket. Going into a FISA court, a secret court, to get a warrant to wiretap an American citizen, this is the highest responsibility. And you have an obligation not just to tell what you have that's bad on somebody, but also any exculpatory evidence. You have to put in a full picture. Now, they submitted a dossier, which Comey himself has admitted was inaccurate, unverified, and salacious. And to the extent we've been able to look at it at all, for instance, they said that dossier says Michael Cohen, a key thing, met with a Russian agent in Prague, Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. Michael Cohen has never been in the Czech Republic, never been in Prague. He can show where he was on that date. And yet it's information like that was the basis of this dossier. So for them to use that dossier to spy on an American citizen is really outrageous. And it shows a mindset that was there, whether it was groupthink, whether it was echo chamber logic or whatever. The fact is they did not do the right thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because Senator Goodlatte of the House Judiciary Committee, he used the word conspiracy when he talked about his reaction to reading this. That's a crime. What is the next step here? Do you believe that there are going to be any criminal prosecutions based on your findings here?
Well, I think now that these findings are out, there should be public hearings. I would think the Judiciary Committee should certainly hold hearings. I think that Rod Rosenstein should be required to explain why he extended the FISA application, why he signed off on that. I think it's important that all this come out now as to why this was done. What do they know? When do they know it? That's a key issue here. And how could they have gone into a secret court, a FISA court, knowing how weak and really how potentially false this evidence was?
Let me ask you something about the FISA court, though, because they apparently did not push for more information on Christopher Steele. They didn't say, well, who's paying this person? Where is he getting his information? Does that strike you as odd at all, that they seem to be so willing to sign off on it without getting more information on where he was coming from or who was paying him?
Yeah, not having seen everything, I can't comment on that other than to say that it is unusual, and it also could show a level of trust between the Justice Department and the court. The fact that all these high-ranking people signed off on this dossier, they must have assumed from that the FBI and the Justice Department had looked into it and had reason to believe, very good reason to believe that it was accurate and that it had something to say. And also, again, remember, this is, as far as I know, the first ever federal investigation of a presidential campaign being carried on while the campaign was ongoing. Right. And to do that based on this flimsy evidence is really, this is a dangerous precedent that was said here. Very dangerous.
One last question for you. Some Democrats on the Intel Committee are pushing back, which is to be expected. They did not want this to be out. They've got their own memo, and that's going through its own process. So we're going to, of course, report on that when that comes out. But they claim that the assertion made about Andrew McCabe in here, that essentially he testified in December of 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought by FISA at the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. That assertion says that this was essential, that this was the spine of their application. They're saying that that is not what he testified in that room. You were in that room. What did you hear?
Yeah, that is my recollection. Is that what he did say? And also, I would point out that this memo was shown to the director of the FBI and 3 of his very top assistants. They went through it line by line. They did not challenge one fact in that report. Now, if there's, to me, such a key issue as McCabe, if the FBI director and his 3 top assistants, if they accepted that and did not challenge it, to me, that certainly backs up the claim that that is what McCabe said. And
there's a transcription, I would assume, of that closed-door briefing.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Of course. Okay. All right. So eventually, we hope we'll find out. Congressman King, thank you very much. I know there'll be a lot more to pursue
here.
Martha. But thanks for being here this evening. So back with me now, Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, joined by Molly Hemingway, Senior Editor at The Federalist, and Jessica Tarlov, Senior Director of Research at Bustle.com, all Fox News contributors, and all here to kind of chew over what we're looking at here. I want to put up a tweet from Mark Warner, Senator Mark Warner, on this. He says, unlike almost every House member who voted in favor of this memo's release, I have actually read the underlying documents on which the Nunes memo are based. They simply do not support its conclusions. In terms of, Ed, let me start with you. In terms of what you believe Devin Nunes' response to that is and that we've heard, can you remind everybody? Based on all of the tweets and reactions, that might be one of the best ones in terms of pointing towards let's stick with the facts, let's get to the evidence. Because before the FISA court, was the dossier 80% of what led to the approval, or was it 10%? Because if it was only 10%, then Devin Nunes is going to have a problem, because then what Mark Warner and others are pointing to on the Democratic side is the underlying evidence may suggest that this is a distortion of the facts. In talking to people around Devin Nunes, they say that if more information comes out, he will be more vindicated, that the underlying document, they want to put more information out here, and they want to be able to show that, in fact, there was malfeasance at the FBI and the Justice Department. I think what Peter King said is important, among other things, at the very top, when he said the reaction from James Comey and a lot of other people has just been a lot of talking points. They are not challenging the baseline facts. Yeah, Jessica, one of the things that we were all told was that there was concerns about national security that would be revealed in this. And I think that anybody who reads it, no matter where you come from, is going to say, yes, you're absolutely right. There are some concerns about our national security that are raised on this, especially when you talk about an American citizen being under this kind of surveillance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those were valid concerns to raise. I am confused as to what names they wanted redacted, though, because that was one of the arguments that Democrats were making. And I read it. I was on Outnumbered while this was going on today, and we were reading through the memo, and I couldn't really find any name there that I thought should have been redacted. I certainly take Senator Warner's point on there, and I hope that we get more information. I hope we get the Democrat response, and then also if the FBI has a response, because Christopher Wray has voiced concerns about the release of this. And I would say as well, to Congressman King's point, the most important thing that I saw in here came in point 5, which was about George Papadopoulos' role in all of this, and that the investigation actually began with him 4 months before the FISA warrant issue with Carter Page. So is this actually about Carter Page, or is this about other people in the Trump campaign, and one who we know has pled guilty at this point? Molly, what do you think this memo reveals at its heart today?
Right. Well, the Bill of Rights to the American Constitution says that the federal government should not be able to arrest us, take our possessions, or spy on us without a very good reason. And what this memo, and that's foundational, that separates us from sort of all the tin pot dictatorships out there. What this memo shows is that unverified information provided by a dishonest foreign spy working on behalf of the Hillary Clinton campaign, that information was used to justify spying on a private American citizen who had volunteered for the Trump campaign. It also tells us that this information that they had about how this dossier was funded and who provided it, and about the shadiness of the character, was not given to the FISA court. And that's something that betrays a trust that I already think people have way too much trust in the 702 authorities and the FISA authorities, but this suggests that we need much better safeguards to protect our civil liberties and our constitutional rights against being spied on without good cause.
Great points, all. Thank you very much. Good to see you all tonight.
Thanks, Martha.
So coming up, what does Special Counsel Robert Mueller do now about the other side of the Russia investigation? Plus, a father whose daughters were abused by disgraced Dr. Larry Nassar could not hold himself back in the courtroom.
I want that son of
So now that the memo is out there and the tactics for surveillance are revealed, what's the impact on the Mueller investigation? That is, Democrats insist that the probe is heating up. See this headline today on Politico. Russia probe lawyers think Mueller could indict Trump. And it goes on to lay out the reasons why they think he could and some other folks' reasons why they think he cannot. So where does all this stand? Jason Chaffetz is the former Oversight Committee chairman and is a Fox News contributor. Austin Goolsbee served as President Obama's chief economist. Gentlemen, good to see both of you this evening. So, Jason Chaffetz, let me give you the first crack at this, your first opportunity to speak out now that it is all out there. What did you think?
Well, it's shocking how willingly and easily the senior leadership of the FBI was manipulated, and to have to go before the FISA court 4 times and never have a warning flag or this information revealed. I mean, it's disappointing. It's sad. It taints what they're doing and how they're doing it. And then for the FBI to try to suppress the release of the names, it's because their own names were in this document.
Does it, staying with you for a moment, Jason Chaffetz, does it surprise you in terms of the FISA court itself, that they didn't ask for more information about who Christopher Steele was or, where he was getting this information? And we also now know that it was media reports, according to this document, it's media reports that were used as corroboration for a document that wasn't even fully corroborated itself yet. That seems pretty flimsy.
No, it was the circular, they gave the information to Yahoo News, which then gives the credibility of the report, and yet the source is the same. Look, the FISA court is a one-way street. There is no other side to it. They rely on just what the prosecutors present to them. But when you have James Comey, the director of the FBI, 3 times signing off on this, there is, I think, a belief and a trust that now should be shattered that what they were presenting them was a complete picture of the justification to do spying.
Austin,
it just wasn't true.
Austin, what's your reaction?
I have 2 reactions. The first is the intelligence community itself, as well as virtually all the Democrats who have seen the evidence this memo was based on, have said that this description by Nunes, which is what's in this memo, leaves out so much as to be utterly misleading and in many cases directly the opposite conclusion from what the intelligence community itself says. So this memo makes clear the investigation of Carter Page began well before they ever went to this FISA court. And we will have to see, and I assume that the president will approve the other intelligence, not just the things that he thinks support his own side of the case.
One of the sort of basic questions that raises is if they're, obviously they were watching Carter Page for some time, and they had some questions about him, about his travel, who he was talking to, and sort of the broad picture that they gave them some dirt. Now they haven't proven that yet, and so Jason Chaffetz,
that we know of.
But why wouldn't he be indicted? People have been indicted.
Guilty,
so
right?
if what they had was in this surveillance, this Christopher Steele report, if it wasn't just that they were using, then they could just chuck that out the window and use the real stuff to go after him with the goods. But they haven't done that, Jason Chaffetz.
No, wait. When you say that, we don't know that they haven't.
The report
says that's what's listed in this memo.
Say that again, Austin?
No, what the report says, though. But what they says is that Mr. McCabe testified earlier that the dossier was the only justification that they had in order to go get this warrant, and that is a compelling piece of evidence. Now, on the heels of this, you also have the Inspector General report, which will be much broader. We've got 4 pages here, but it doesn't look good, and the Democrats, to their own shame, have been saying, oh, this is the, I mean, come on. If this was going the other way, they would have been, you know, just absolutely screaming bloody murder.
You know what? I think they should. I mean, the Democrats are going through the process, Austin, and they should get their memo out. Let's see everything. I mean, let the people decide.
Look, I agree with that.
Yeah.
If there are questions raised by this memo, that's fine. We should answer those questions. We should not do what we've done so far, which is have only a one-sided, literally only Republicans voted to release this cherry-picked part of the information, and the other side has not been able to say that there's other information.
And it went, you know, I mean, everybody analyzed it. They figured out whether they need to strip anything out. But I think we want to see all of it. We want to see the underlying documents, and we want to see the Democrats' memo as well. So, gentlemen, thank you. Good to see you tonight. Busy night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So coming up right here, President Trump stepping up pressure on North Korea, meeting with defectors who escaped horrors.
Now facing charges, Douglas Haig is accused of manufacturing armor-piercing bullets. A complaint filed in court says his fingerprints were on bullets found inside the Mandalay Bay hotel room where the attack was launched. Haig held a news conference Friday saying he noticed nothing suspicious when he sold 720 rounds of ammunition to Stephen Paddock. This year's flu season continues to intensify. According to the CDC's latest report released Friday, 1 of every 14 visits to doctors and clinics were for symptoms of the flu. That's the highest level since the swine flu pandemic in 2009. Experts say the flu season usually peaks in February. I'm Jonathan Hunt. Now back to the story with Martha MacCallum.
I knew if any man or Larry would have done this to anyone in my family, my nieces or nephews, or even the little girls that I had coached for so long. That's how I knew what he was doing was wrong.
That was from our interview with several survivors of Dr. Larry Nassar's abuse this week on the devastating impact that the abuse and the ramifications afterwards have had on all of their families. And that devastation played out so potently in court in a dramatic fashion. Watch this. The father of 3 daughters who were abused by that man lunges at the former USA Gymnastics team doctor during a hearing in a Michigan courtroom. Watch what happens here.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon. Would you do that?
That is not.
Yes or no?
No, sir.
Would you give me 1 minute?
You know that I can't do that. That's not how it is.
Well, I'm going to have to get someone.
Stay down. I understand.
Let me have it.
Awful. I mean, you just feel for him, for his daughter standing there, and you can understand it. Meanwhile, today, the Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee, announced that they're launching an independent investigation now into the decades-long abuse by Nassar, hiring outside counsel, Ropes and Gray, to conduct that probe. A lot of people wonder how they didn't know about this for so long. And I also want to mention that at the end of that video, that father says to the court officers, "What would you do if you were in my shoes?" So it was one of the most memorable moments of the president's State of the Union address this week, sharing the painful story of a North Korean defector who was tortured after losing an arm and a leg when he was hit by a train as a boy, scavenging. He was out there scavenging for food at the time. President Trump highlighting the human toll of the regime of dictator Kim Jong-un.
But Sung-ho, I understand you still keep those old crutches as a reminder of how far you've come. Your great sacrifice is an inspiration to us all. Please, thank you.
That was probably the most incredible moment of the night. There were several moments like that with very moving stories of people in the audience. But today, that gentleman came to the White House, and the president sat down with him and with other defectors as well, people who have escaped the horror and devastation of life in North Korea. The Oval Office meeting raising pressure on Kim Jong-un, with some foreign policy critics questioning the strategy, calling it risky. Here now with his reaction, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, a CIA-trained operative, intel operative and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Obviously that's a powerful moment.
Absolutely.
But you maintain that there's also a serious policy initiative that underlies what we just saw.
Oh, absolutely. And this risky stuff, look, walking across the street in New York's risky. You've got to take some action. President Trump has materially changed the trajectory of our relationship with North Korea and, frankly, with China as well. This is a way of personalizing it and actually both making it very clear that he's committed to the process of trying to push the Koreans to step away from several bad things they're doing, a lot of bad actions. But more importantly, Martha, he has done something President Obama completely failed to do, put a human face on it. We're talking about a dictator who has subjugated his people to untold horrors. This is only the tip of the iceberg. But the president now has both seized the moral high ground and made this very personal and a personal poke at saying, you need to change the way you're doing things. And this is one of the reasons we are done with this.
It's fascinating, that it's being called risky. And it just sort of reminds me of what we've seen from Nikki Haley at the UN and with this instance at the White House with the president, where you're not making it up. I mean, You're just telling these human being stories.
Laying it out.
This is what happened. And you put light on it. You let the world look at it. And you let North Korea know that it's an argument, potentially, for what might have to be done down the line.
Right. And since we're talking about moral high ground here, there are some red lines coming up. The North Koreans have said at the UN, as a matter of fact, that they're going to do an above-ground test of a hydrogen weapon. That's going to be a major red line. That's something that we're very worried about. There's other things we're worried about regarding ICBMs. Hawaii just went through the so-called warning that didn't exist, but there is that potential. So it's these things that clearly the president has his eye on. Pentagon is constantly planning. I've heard they've asked for more options against North Korea from the White House to the Pentagon. But now the president has both said, this is important because here's what's going on. And it gives people an understanding of why the president cares.
Which is so important for everyone to understand when you're working on policy. Before I let you go, obviously you've spent much of your life in the intel community, and you see what James Comey has said during the course of today, that this is undercut, that this memo undercuts what you all are trying to do. What's your reaction to that?
Bring it on. Let's see everything. There's nothing here that I believe would reveal sources and methods. But trust me, much more has been revealed about things that I can't believe are out there right now. But the material facts used to justify things, put them out there. The facts are the facts. Just put the sunlight on it. Secondly, I cannot believe that anybody would accept Russian propaganda via this Steele character, process that as intelligence. Russia, let me say this very clearly, Martha, there was Russian collusion. It was Fusion GPS taking Russian propaganda, the Russians prepared this, and putting it through the system so that now, even to this day, is upsetting the cart of apples. So when Senator McCain says the Russians are trying to undermine our democracy, it is via what we've seen here through Fusion GPS, not collusion. And this is what I and others...
You think the Russians were pulling the strings with the Fusion folks? They're like, yeah, absolutely. Precisely. We're going to help you out. We've got dirt on Hillary.
There you go.
And they played right into their hands.
Precisely.
Fascinating. We'll see where it goes. Thank you very much. Good to see you, Colonel.
Good seeing you.
So it has been 1 year since the dangerous riots on UC Berkeley's campus. 2 conservative groups are suing the university, and the DOJ is urging the court not to dismiss their case. We have the attorney representing those groups and a nice young man who represents the cause as well. He's coming up. Plus, only 2 days until Justin Timberlake reemerges at the Super Bowl halftime show. And my Patriots take home the Lombardi Trophy, right? That's what's going to happen. Jesse Waters, our favorite Eagles fan, is standing by to offer his Super Bowl prediction. He's probably wrong, but we'll be right back with that.
If the Eagles win, I think you should wear an Eagles jersey on the set. How about that?
Students and residents were angered over conservative speakers making appearances on the campus. And now the Department of Justice has just come down in favor of conservative students, claiming the university administrators unfairly hampered their ability to allow conservative voices on their campus. In moments, the attorney representing those conservative students, along with the College Republicans president, will join me. But first, Jonathan Hunt with the backstory tonight. Jonathan.
Martha, for Berkeley and its students, it's been a roller coaster year with the university at the center of the campus free speech debate. 1 year ago, around 1,000 students demonstrated against the campus appearance by Milo Yiannopoulos. It began peacefully but ended in widespread violence after a group of around 150 anti-fascist extremists joined the protest, setting fires and smashing windows. Security fears then played a major part in the cancellations of a planned April appearance by conservative author and speaker Ann Coulter, and in September of what college Republicans and Milo Yiannopoulos dubbed Free Speech Week. Now the Justice Department is backing the conservative students' lawsuit against Berkeley because, according to the DOJ, administrators used their, quote, unfettered discretion to decide which speakers are subject to arduous curfews, prohibitive security costs, or undesirable venues. Berkeley officials released a statement calling the allegations that the university discriminated against conservative speakers unfounded and said, quote, the campus is committed to ensuring that student groups may hold events with speakers of their choosing, and it has expended significant resources to allow events to go forward without compromising the safety or security of the campus. And Berkeley's new chancellor, aware no doubt of the physical and reputational damage done as a result of last year's violence, has called on all students to be tolerant and, if they disagree with an invited speaker's views, to protest peacefully and to honor Berkeley's free speech tradition. Many Republicans on campus, Martha, appear to feel the chancellor's plea is hypocritical, and Berkeley needs to be reminded by the courts of its free speech obligations. Martha?
Jonathan, thank you. Here now, Harmeet Dillon, the attorney representing the Young America's Foundation and the UC Berkeley College Republicans in their lawsuit against the university, and Bradley Devlin, current UC Berkeley student and president of UC Berkeley College Republicans. Good to see both of you tonight. So, Bradley, we all remember, that there were sort of what may turn out to have been lip service about being more tolerant, allowing more voices in the bastion of free speech that Berkeley has always claimed it is. What have you seen in terms of the change in that regard this year?
Martha, this past year, I've really been focusing on Ronald Reagan's words, if not us, who? If not now, when? So this lawsuit has that exactly in mind. On a campus where Antifa and other violent organizations are openly recruiting, this is a way that we can retain our right to free speech on campus while retaining that right for progeny, whether they're liberal or conservative.
Harmeet, get us up to speed on where this DOJ lawsuit is right now, the backing of the DOJ in your lawsuit.
Right after Ann Coulter's speech was shut down effectively by the university in April, we filed this lawsuit, around that same week. And so the university moved to dismiss through its outside private lawyers paid for by taxpayers. And they also changed the policy in writing. And so the judge agreed to allow us to amend our lawsuit to reflect challenge to the new policy. And the new policy is basically the same as the old policy, only using some different language. Instead of high-profile speakers, they're calling it major events, but it has the same constitutional defects that the Department of Justice has identified. So in the second round of motion to dismiss, the DOJ filed this statement of interest last week, and they agree that our lawsuit should be allowed to proceed and that the court should decide whether Berkeley has violated the Constitution by multiple unconstitutional restrictions on conservative speech on campus. So we're looking forward to our day in court, and we'll be arguing this motion in court in 2 weeks.
So, Bradley, in terms of the practical application, Rachel Brand of the Department of Justice wrote a piece about this, and she talks about how, obviously these violent episodes that we've all witnessed, and the shouting down of speech and the sort of ignoring of thought diversity in the name of recognizing other forms of diversity at times, that even speaking out in class is something that has been so hampered across this country. And I hear it from college students all the time. That's sort of almost in many ways even more important, perhaps, than the outward violence, which, of course, is reprehensible and no one wants to see. What's your experience with how that's evolving on campus?
Absolutely. I've seen it time and time again with members of my club. They come up to me and they say, gosh, I wrote a paper that has a neo-realist perspective on international relations. I wrote a conservative lens paper, and I've consistently been marked down compared to my peers. And I asked them, is there any way we can go forward and pursue this with the professors? That happened to me first semester of my freshman year in an international relations class. I challenged it with the GSI, the graduate student instructor who's in charge of preliminary grading, and the professor came back and gave me a higher grade. There are ways that we can disempower these radical leftist GSIs and go to the professors and maybe get a better grade and keep challenging them over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I heard a sad story actually last night about a young woman, very bright woman at a major university in the Midwest who wanted to be a political science major and literally halfway through freshman year said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm going to switch my major. That's heartbreaking. A university experience, Harmeet, should be obviously a place where there's a lot of different viewpoints presented, and the debate over them helps you form your own opinions as a student.
Martha, you're so correct. This is so disappointing to me because back when I was a student at Dartmouth College, I had very similar experiences to what Bradley and his friends and my clients are experiencing right now. 30 years later, I think the election of President Trump was used as a trigger by many universities around the country to really crack down. So we've heard of students being told not to speak about the president's victory. We've been told that it's racist to talk about border security on campus. And this is really progressivism run amok. And, it's fine for people to hold different viewpoints, but there's no respect on the left for the views of the right. So
but everyone's viewpoint has to be respected.
Illegal.
That's the point. And
that's right.
It's really, so it's fascinating to see that the Department of Justice is getting behind this, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you both for being here tonight. Good to see you both.
Thank you, Martha.
So Friday flashback.